The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. Quick reminder. I know I've said this a couple of times, but I feel like it's never overdone to remind people of what's going on, especially our members on upcoming shows. So next week, Monday, I'm hosting the show and the bonus show. Tuesday, I'm traveling out to Las Vegas, as I do twice a year, to Mike Papantonio's conference. There will be a progressive meeting of the minds of sorts taking place. I might do some live streaming there. Unsure exactly what I'll be doing. I will be doing the show Wednesday through Friday from Vegas next week. And Tuesday, we will have Ben Dixon filling in for me, which will be really great. It's been a little while since he's filled in, and I feel like most people like him, and always, people who dislike the guest hosts are way more likely to get in touch than people who like them. So my belief is, and I hope it's not a mistaken belief, particularly among our paid subscribers, that people generally like it when Ben guest hosts. And I hope and I get that if people are signing up to see me, which is great, that they will be slightly displeased when someone else is guest hosting, because if they preferred that person, they'd watch or listen to their show instead of this one. So I get that. But I've been super happy with Ben's job filling in. So I will be here Monday, Ben Tuesday. I will be on a 6+ hour flight out to Las Vegas. Sometimes, I was checking it out, sometimes the Boston-Vegas flights are taking longer than 6.5 hours, depending on the direction of takeoff and landing and the winds on a particular day. But sometimes it's less. Hopefully it's less, because it starts to get very long. Daytime flight, that's that long. I will get there Tuesday, and then I will get set up and do the show there for the rest of the week, and then we'll be back to the normal thing the following week. Okay. A few stories I want to discuss with you today. The Boeing 737 MAX 8 crash story is first and foremost a tragedy. Hundreds of people now in 2 crashes died, their family members grieving, affected. That is sort of like a foregone conclusion, and I want to make sure I'm not sort of insensitive to that reality when I talk about other things. But one of the other sort of secondary stories in the Boeing 737 MAX 8 crash circumstances are, once again, these issues around regulation and the role of government in regulating business. And there are now a couple of different ways in which the Boeing 737 MAX 8 story is confirming that we need regulation, and that the actions of the federal government, when they are absent, are actually significantly problematic. One example, which I already gave you, is that we found out that there were already plans for addressing, hopefully fixing, the software issue that is believed to be the problem on this plane, but that Donald Trump's temper tantrum government shutdown over wall funding a couple of months ago slowed down the rollout of what was believed to be a fix. So that's already one example where government was overseeing a solution, and they ultimately did not, partially because of the government shutdown. We now have additional sort of texture to the government role in regulation here, because in 2005, the FAA gave airplane manufacturers the power to hire or basically assign employees of their own employees to be sort of in-house regulators. And this streamlined what was called this revolving door process by making it possible for Boeing to regulate itself without having to get its lobbyists appointed to the FAA. So understand that even what was going on before was problematic, which is Boeing lobbyists get appointed to the FAA, and it's effectively as though Boeing is regulating itself. They streamlined that by just saying you could just hire people and have them regulate in-house. And then it is once again another one of these examples of a sort of libertarian-ish right-wing deregulation and the continued problems that it brings. Do we know for sure that if this was not allowed, that the Boeing 737 MAX 8 would not have been cleared to fly until this issue had been solved? We can't say that, or at least I've not seen information to say that we can say that with certitude. But once again, when we see regulatory capture in the flesh, regulatory capture, of course, when corporations capture control of the industries capture control of the regulators that are supposed to be independently regulating them. Appointing lobbyists to the FAA is a perfect example. Just hiring your own employees to do the regulation is another example. We know that bad things happen, and time again, I'm not about overregulation. This is a talking point from the right. Overregulation basically isn't a thing. When people call me and they say, David, aren't you against oppressive regulations? I say, give me an example, and they never have one. Does that mean they don't exist? No, but clearly overregulation is not the problem in industry. And I would argue that underregulation is the problem. And we have yet another one of these examples as to how that kind of has shaken out when it comes to this Boeing fiasco. The priority, the goal, obviously, in telling you about all of this is that the problem with this particular plane gets fixed, and that we stop parroting this meme that businesses are overregulated. They are not. I'm sure we can find examples of anything if we look for it in a country of 330 million people. But the big picture is that business is not overregulated in the United States. There are states that are renewing the push for taxes on sugary drinks. We've covered individual instances of these taxes on sugary drinks for a very long time. It's been 3 decades since the first sort of tax on sugary drinks was enacted, and Connecticut's governor is now pushing for one to help close a budget deficit. And it does appear as though it's going to be a fight in Connecticut. There are these taxes on sodas and on sugar-loaded drinks, which have been enacted in recent years in a number of different cities across the country. But the beverage lobby is very, very strong, and it has along with its allies, been very effective in pushing back against state-level proposals. So you might say, well, hold on, there was something in New York about this, and you're right, except those were New York City taxes at the state level, which is a totally different type of regulation and tax. It has been difficult in great part because of the soda and beverage lobby. And in Connecticut now, they want to do a 1.5 cent per ounce tax on sugar-sweetened drinks. And I'm more interested here in some of the minutia that exists, because we can debate in general. We've done interviews about vice taxes. We've talked about the broader impact that they have and how states are creating a revenue source from an activity which they claim to be against. But if people stop doing it, they would lose the revenue. So an example is speeding tickets. We say, as a society, for public safety, we want to dissuade people from speeding. Speeding makes the roads less safe. So when police see people speeding, they pull them over, they might give them a ticket, and that becomes a revenue source. The problem becomes that when the behavior is predictable, the police departments start to count on that revenue to fund their ongoing operations. So if they were actually successful at totally dissuading people from speeding, they lose the revenue and would actually be damaged in terms of their ability to fund their operations. It's a similar sort of dynamic when we talk about vice taxes, whether it's the regulation and taxation of cigarettes or alcohol, or in this case, sodas. That's a common conversation which we've had before. I'm actually kind of in the nitty gritty on this one in terms of what counts as a sugar added drink, because as we know, Coca-Cola is very clearly a sugar added drink. Bottled water is not. Flavored bottled water, like Poland Springs Mandarin Orange, for example, which my girlfriend loves to buy. That one, it doesn't have any added sugar. It has flavoring, which doesn't really appear in the ingredients in any kind of specific way, but that is not a sugar added drink. But what about some of these drinks that don't have added sugars, but they have added a concentrate from the fruit itself, which is, of course, not technically considered an added sugar, but at the same time, you're taking the sugar that exists naturally in the fruit, concentrating it and putting it back in to make the drink sweeter than it would be if you just juice the fruits with no added concentrate. I don't know the answer, but I'm genuinely curious as to how you're going to define sugar added, because beverage manufacturers have gotten extraordinarily clever at hiding or obscuring the ways in which the drinks are made sweeter than what they would be merely by juicing or blending what are sort of listed as the flavors or ingredients in the juice. So I'm curious how they'll do that. As far as passing this or not, I have no strong opposition in principle to these taxes. Where I get a little concerned is that they can disproportionately affect not only the poor, but they can also disproportionately affect mom and pop businesses who make money by selling these drinks and sodas, which I think are generally speaking unhealthy. I understand that, but they're just as unhealthy if you buy them at the large grocery store as if you buy them at the mom and pop. And the mom and pop is less able to sort of weather the decreased demand that we would see if such a tax is added. So those are my primary concerns. I don't have any particular opposition to these types of taxes in kind of a general sense. One of the products that we have not talked too much about in terms of how it's been affected by Donald Trump's trade war is coffee. We have talked a lot about soy and soybeans and how American soybean farmers are being significantly hurt by Donald Trump's trade war, which includes a number of different tariffs, which we've discussed now for a year or even longer. Coffee is a product that is now suffering the consequences of multiple tariffs. And Eater, interestingly enough, has been keeping a running list of these 10 to 25% tariffs that have been added to the top of certain products. And coffee is now on that list. And of course, this trade war has escalated very quickly. And we saw kind of like a tit for tat. If you do it, I'll do it. And then we do it and they do it again with China on a lot of different products. And this has added hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs since the beginning of this, with no clear off-ramp and a growing trade deficit with China, which supposedly we were told by Donald Trump the tariffs were going to solve. Now China is adding another round of tariffs, and it includes a tax on coffee. And this is something that was announced months and months ago, but we're now actually seeing the effects of, and it's making coffee more expensive. And this is reducing, it's both having an impact on demand and it's having an impact on end prices. Now, if you go to Starbucks, for example, you might not have noticed. And the way Starbucks is able to, it's kind of an interesting, coffee is an interesting business, which I've studied a little bit. What Starbucks does is their whole thing, and I'm speaking from research, not from personal experiences. I haven't been to a Starbucks in 15 years or something at this point. Their big selling point is that you can get the same drink, the exact drink you want, anywhere in the world, and it should, if everything goes right, basically taste the same. And the only way you can really do that is by having relatively dark roasts. When you roast beans longer, the flavor becomes much more uniform. And this is a way that you can source coffee the way Starbucks needs to based on the amount they use from all sorts of different places and end up with a very similar product, which means that Starbucks in all countries need to be sort of consistently buying beans that, when heavily roasted, end up roughly the same. They have huge buying power, economies of scale. So Starbucks is not really being impacted by this. However, what we call in the United States third wave coffee, hipster coffee, sometimes it's called, apply whatever term to it you want. The more boutique coffee shops, which exist not only in the United States, but in many, many parts of the world, are being more affected. And some of the ones I visited and talked to actually say that they are impacted by changing prices on beans in terms of the style of coffee that they can serve. And of course, the biggest markets, like, for example, China, are going to, in terms of a dollar basis, be even more affected by changes to something like the price of coffee. Chocolate was another one that was brought up early on, although there is less reporting about how that has been impacted by Donald Trump's tariffs. I personally have not seen much of a change. I basically buy two types of beans for my machine. There's a company called George Howell here in the Boston area. Sometimes I'll get their espresso blend. I think it has gone up in the last year by like $2 a bag, but that basically means that I'm paying an extra $4 a month. I think I go through 2 bags a month. The other one that I really like is Fazenda, which I have been sampling, and that is local also here to the Boston area. And the price has not changed for more than a year on that one. Let me know, by the way, I will mention, we did have to up our prices for David Pakman Show coffee available on our website by 75 cents a bag, specifically because our supplier came to us and said, my beans are costing me more, and I need your help in passing that along because I can't really, he gives us a really good deal, I can't really take the 75-cent hit. So this is how it works. I mean, this is how tariffs lead to the cost being passed on to the end user. We have a supplier whose beans are now costing him more. He contacts me and says, I need to pass that along to you in terms of the wholesale price. And I say, well, we make very little off of each bag of coffee. I need to pass it on to our customers. And this is what Donald Trump fundamentally seems to not understand. And we are seeing it personified on the David Pakman Show gear store. Now, I want to say thank you to our audience because coffee sales have not dipped at all since we have increased the price. And I guess we have committed buyers or what have you. Let me know if you've changed your coffee consumption habits as a result of changing prices. If you go to Starbucks, you probably haven't because the prices there haven't really changed. That's it for today. I will be here with a new show, new bonus show on Monday. Ben Dixon on Tuesday. I will join you from Las Vegas for the rest of the week starting on Wednesday.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.